Hi, it's Mike Stevenson here. In this video we're going to have a look at the scenario for business activity monitoring from Serverless 360, where we're going to look at correlation with lookup. So the idea here is that I might have a number of different logic apps or components that act upon the same transaction within a business process, and so maybe it might be a complicated process, or I may have decoupled it into a number of different components, and they all need to indicate that there's a milestone or checkpoint within their component, and they need to be brought together to indicate there's the same sort of business transaction happening. So let's have a quick look at what that might look like. So here I've got a scenario where I'm going to have three logic apps. Each one of them is going to do some work. I'm going to trigger them from Postman. So let's pretend these are like different parts of processing an order, and from Postman I'm going to send a message to each one with an order number in it. And what we're going to try and do is bring together a single transaction that we can present to a support operator or a business user, which is a simplified view across these broken down components, because the support operator, until they know that there's a problem, they don't really care too much about the detail of how it's implemented. First thing they need to know is actually that there is a problem and how far through the process we've got, and that'll help them sort of zone in on where a problem might be or where some support task needs to be done. So what we're going to do is each of these logic apps will happen potentially at different times, but they're all going to pass telemetry from their BAM checkpoints to the BAM service, and they're going to include the order number, which is how we'll map these events together to indicate that they're part of the same process. So if we have a look at this in action, so we'll start off by having a look at our process. So I've got my business process number 5 example, and up here I've got transaction 1, and you can see that there's a number of stages here: 0, 1, 2, 3. Now I've got three logic apps. So stage 0 and stage 1 are going to happen in logic app number 1. Stage 2 is going to happen in logic app 2, and stage 3 is going to happen in logic app 3. Now, the first thing to remember is these aren't going to all happen straight off the back of each other. There's going to be a break in between each of them. But also, if you notice the difference to a previous video where we talked about how you could have different transactions within a business process implemented in different places. This is a slightly different to that, because here we've got one transaction but multiple different components are participating in this business process transaction. So if we have a look at our logic apps, first off we've got logic app number 1, which I'm going to fire from Postman. I'm going to receive a message with an order number in it, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to start my transaction, pass the order number as a header. So here's my transaction name, stage, and process name, and I'm going to do a checkpoint passing in the order number, and I'm going to pass stage number 1 and indicate that that's successful. Now over in my BAM designer, you can see up here I've indicated on these stages that there's going to be an order number on the message. So if you remember, on logic app 1, just one point of note here is we're going to have the order number passed in. So here on my transaction for when we start, I'm going to create a property called order number when my transaction's created, and that's going to create my transaction. Then everything else is going to map to this order number to map their transactions to it. Now in this case, because I'm creating the transaction with an explicit start shape, I can specify that just once at the start. But if these events could happen out of order, which is a future video we'll talk about, you would have to set those properties on each stage, but here I just need to do it on the first one. So in each time though, I am passing that header property in, because that's how I'm going to correlate it. So I'm going to look for a transaction that's got the order number on it, and these will all correlate together. So if we go into the operations side of this, so I'm in my business process 5 demo here, I've got my 3 logic apps. If we go to the BAM section, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in my Postman here, and I'm going to start off by posting a message to the first logic app with order 9999, and what I should see is my transaction gets created here. You can see I've got my order number, it's in process, stage 0 is executed, and we should see stage 1 come through pretty quickly. So we'll see that come through in a second. Now what we should see next is if we go on to the second Postman tab here, so logic app number 1 is already ran. So we'll be able to see here we've got an instance of it having run just a second or two ago. Logic app 2 hasn't ran yet, so this is the thing I was saying about, so you can see that one was like 10 minutes ago. Here the idea is that the second part of the process hasn't ran yet, so there might be other systems doing some things, and the rest of that process might not happen. It could be like hours, minutes, days later on. We've still got this one in flight over here. Part 2 will trigger now, and that'll trigger the second logic app, and what we should see is that this event starts getting updated. So we'll just wait for that to come through. So we can see that the stage 2 events come through now. I think I might have misconfigured stage 1 because that event hasn't come up yet, so I'll have to have a look at that separately and check why my demo's not working there. But so that was logic app number 2, which we can see is ran over here. It's done its checkpoint with correlation, used order number 999, fired that through, and we've got our updated checkpoint over here. So we know we've done part of our process now. The next thing we need to do is we need to trigger logic app number 3. So again, we're going to pass in the same order number. So we've triggered the third logic app, and if we just have a look, that should run over here. So we've got the one at 702. We can see that's ran through fine. It would have passed the order number here, and if we go and look, we should see that that transaction for that order is now complete, and we've got stage 3. So stage 3 indicates the transaction's complete in the config of the logic app, so you can see down here, and that's really how we can have different components that aren't sequentially linked together, but they're all participating in the same business process transaction, and they can use the checkpoint with correlation shape to use a business a piece of business data. So perhaps it's an order number, perhaps it's a customer number or something like that. It can link records together to create an end-to-end sort of business activity monitoring process transaction, which is actually implemented in a completely different set of event-based scenarios happening in your architecture, which makes that, from a support operator's perspective, that can make the life a lot easier to see if especially things like long-running transactions. So you might have a process where you send an order, or you receive an order, and over the course of a week things are happening until that order gets delivered. You can actually correlate all those events based on the order ID and get an end-to-end view across the entire order, which would be quite cool. So hopefully that introduces a much more powerful feature within the BAM implementation, and you can leverage that to do some quite cool stuff. And just double check your configuration and make sure you test it, because obviously my demo didn't quite work there with stage 1 not showing yet, and I'll have to check what I configured incorrectly. But thanks for checking out the video today, and hopefully that's useful for people.